Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The sound of the front door slamming shut echoed like a gunshot through the silent apartment, shattering the fragile peace of the morning. Julian flinched, his coffee splashing over the rim of the mug and scalding his hand, but the physical pain was a dull throb compared to the chaotic drumbeat of his heart. He stared at the empty hallway where Kaylin had just stood, the scent of expensive cologne and stale whiskey still lingering in the air, a haunting reminder of the night that had dismantled Julian's entire existence. Just 12 hours ago, Kaylin had pinned him against the cold railing of a balcony, mouth tasting of smoke and desperation, and devoured him. But this morning, Kaylin had walked into the kitchen, eyes clear and cold as glacial ice, and asked, "Did we make it home okay? I don't remember a thing past midnight." It was the perfect lie. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Julian should have grabbed it. He should have laughed, called Kaylin a lightweight, and resecured the mask of the straight, platonic roommate he had worn for 3 agonizing years. But as he wiped the spilled coffee from the granite counter, his hand trembling, Julian realized with a sickening lurch that the mask no longer fit. The cracks were too deep. The hunger he had seen in Kaylin's eyes before the blackout wasn't something alcohol invented. Alcohol had merely unlocked the cage. The apartment they shared was a masterpiece of modern architecture. A glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city's gray skyline. It was clinical, pristine, and entirely Kaylin's taste. Kaylin was the son of a shipping magnate, a man who moved through life with the dangerous, effortless grace of a panther in a petting zoo. Julian was the scholarship architecture student, the quiet observer, the one who paid his half of the rent by designing freelance layouts and tutoring rich undergraduates. They were an unlikely pair. Fire and ice. Chaos and order. For years, Julian had perfected the art of acting straight. It was a survival mechanism. He had convinced himself that his infatuation with Kaylin was a temporary madness, a byproduct of proximity to someone so aesthetically perfect. To cope, Julian lived a double life. By day, he was the bro-ish roommate who talked about gym gains and nodded along to Kaylin's stories about women. By night, in the safety of his locked bedroom, he consumed media that reflected the yearning hollowing him out. Web novels, dramas, clips of men finding solace in men. The incident that started the spiral happened on a Tuesday. It was raining, a torrential downpour that battered the glass walls. Julian sat on the living room sofa, headphones on, his laptop balanced on his knees. He was deep into a compilation video, a scene from a gritty noir drama where 2 rival gangsters shared a cigarette in the rain, the subtext screaming louder than the dialogue. The look in their eyes was raw, possessing a naked vulnerability that Julian craved. He didn't hear the elevator ding. He didn't feel the vibration of footsteps on the hardwood. Intense stuff. A deep voice rumbled right beside his ear. Julian jumped so hard his laptop nearly clattered to the floor. He slammed the lid shut, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He whipped his head around to find Kaylin leaning over the back of the sofa, a smirk playing on his lips, his damp hair falling over his forehead. "Jesus, Kaylin, don't sneak up on me." Julian's voice cracked. He prayed his face wasn't as red as it felt. Kaylin walked around the sofa, collapsing onto the cushion next to Julian with a heavy sigh. He was too close. His thigh brushed Julian's, sending a jolt of electricity straight to Julian's groin. "I wasn't sneaking. You were just engrossed." "What was that?" "Didn't know you were into foreign cinema." "Just research," Julian lied, his throat dry. "For a narrative structure class. Analyzing tension." "Tension," Kaylin repeated, testing the word. He turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto Julian's. There was a glimmer there, amusement, suspicion. That made Julian's stomach twist. It looked like a romance. 2 guys. "It's a crime drama," Julian deflected quickly, grabbing the remote to turn on the TV, desperate for background noise. "Brotherhood. Loyalty. That sort of thing. Right? Brotherhood." Kaylin didn't look away. He stretched his arm out along the back of the sofa, his fingers inches from Julian's shoulder. You know, Jules, you don't have to be so jumpy. Whatever you're watching, I don't judge. We share a bathroom. There are no secrets here. If you knew what I was thinking when I look at you, Julian thought, staring blindly at the TV screen, you would evict me by sunrise. I'm not jumpy, Julian muttered, forcing a laugh. Just tired. Kalen's hand dropped, his fingers idly playing with the fabric of Julian's shirt at the shoulder. A casual, platonic touch. Or was it? You've been tense lately. We should go out. Blow off some steam. My cousin is hosting a holiday bash at the Sky Lounge this weekend. You're coming. It wasn't a request. It was a command. The days leading up to the party were a masterclass in psychological torture. Kalen seemed to have turned up the dial on his physicality. He walked around the apartment shirtless more often, the sculpted lines of his torso on display like fine art. He lingered in doorways while Julian studied. He initiated contact constantly. A hand on the back, a playful shove, a knee pressing against Julian's under the dining table. Julian felt like a wire pulled to its breaking point. He maintained the act, laughing at the right moments, making comments about the attractive barista at the coffee shop, constructing a fortress of heteronormativity. But Kalen was chipping away at the mortar. The night of the party, the air was cold enough to freeze breath in the lungs. The Sky Lounge was a kaleidoscope of velvet, crystal, and old money. The music was a heavy, thumping bass that vibrated in the floorboards. Kalen was in his element. Dressed in a black silk shirt unbuttoned to the sternum and a fitted suit, he looked like a prince of the underworld. Julian, in a stiff charcoal suit, felt like the shadow trailing behind him. The alcohol flowed freely. Kalen was drinking dark amber liquor, his eyes scanning the room, but always returning to Julian. Every time a woman approached Kalen, and many did, he would charm them, but his hand would find its way to Julian's shoulder, pulling him into the conversation, anchoring him there. This is Julian, Kalen would say, his voice rougher than usual. My better half. The genius who keeps my life in order. It was a joke. It had to be. Around midnight, the atmosphere shifted. Julian, overwhelmed by the noise and the suffocating proximity of Kalen's heat, retreated to the terrace. The winter air was biting, a welcome relief against his flushed skin. He leaned against the stone balustrade, looking down at the city lights, trying to regulate his breathing. The sliding door hissed open. Hiding. Julian didn't turn. Just getting air. Kalen moved up beside him. He wasn't wearing his coat. The cold didn't seem to touch him. He exuded a feverish heat. You've been avoiding me tonight.
I har ventet, Julian lidt.
Liar. The word was a growl. Kalen turned, leaning his back against the railing so he was facing Julian. His eyes were dark, dilated, swimming with intoxication and something far more dangerous. I saw you watching that girl earlier. The blonde. She was nice, Julian said automatically. Not really my type, but... Stop it. The command was soft, but it silenced Julian instantly. Stop what? Stop acting. Kalen stepped closer, invading Julian's personal space. He smelled of whiskey and cedarwood. Stop pretending you care about the blonde. Stop pretending you aren't analyzing my tension. Stop pretending you don't want to know what I saw on your screen that day. Julian's heart stopped. I told you, it was just... I saw the way you looked at the screen, Jules, Kalen murmured, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. He reached out, his hand cupping Julian's jaw, his thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. You looked hungry, sad, like you were watching a life you weren't allowed to have. Kalen, you're drunk? Julian gasped, his resolve crumbling under the touch. He tried to pull back, but the railing was behind him. He was trapped. Maybe, Kalen conceded, his gaze dropping to Julian's lips. But alcohol is a truth serum, isn't it? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't want this. We're roommates. We're friends. I'm straight, Julian stammered, the lies tasting like ash. Are you? Kalen challenged. Before Julian could answer, Kaylin surged forward. It wasn't a gentle first kiss. It was a collision. Kaylin's mouth crushed against Julian's, demanding, possessive, angry. He bit at Julian's lower lip, forcing a gasp that allowed him to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into Julian's mouth with shocking intimacy. For a second, Julian froze. His brain screamed danger, ruin, mistake. But his body, starved and deprived for 3 years, betrayed him. His hands flew up, gripping the silk of Kaylin's shirt, pulling him closer. He kissed back, pouring all the repression, all the fear, all the longing into the movement. It lasted for an eternity and a second. Kaylin groaned into the kiss, his hips grinding against Julian's, hard and undeniable. Then, a glass shattered inside the venue. The noise broke the spell. Kaylin pulled back, his chest heaving, his eyes wide and unfocused. He blinked, swaying slightly. Jules. Julian was trembling so hard he could barely stand. Kaylin rubbed his face with one hand, stumbling back. I need to sit down. And just like that, the predator was gone, replaced by a messy, inebriated young man. The car ride home was silent. Kaylin passed out the moment they hit the sofa. Julian didn't sleep at all. Now it was the holidays. 3 days after the forgotten kiss. Because the universe had a cruel sense of humor, they had pre-booked a trip to Kaylin's family cabin in the mountains months ago. It was supposed to be a ski trip with a group of friends, but everyone had canceled due to a flu outbreak. Everyone except them. Julian had tried to back out. He had cited work, illness, family emergencies. Kaylin had shot them all down with a manic cheerfulness that felt brittle. Don't be a flake, Jules. I need you there. Who else is going to cook? So here they were, snowed in. The cabin was rustic luxury. Massive timber beams, a roaring stone fireplace, and pelts of faux fur everywhere. Outside, a blizzard raged, turning the world into a white void. Inside, the silence was deafening. They moved around each other like ghosts. Kaylin kept the I don't remember act up flawlessly. He was boisterous, loud, making jokes. But he didn't touch Julian. Not once. The casual contact was gone, replaced by a rigid, careful distance that hurt more than the aggression. On the second night, the power went out. The heating hummed to a halt. The lights died. The only illumination came from the dying embers of the fireplace. Great! Kaylin's voice came from the darkness of the kitchen. Just great. Julian sat on the rug by the fire, hugging his knees. He was wearing 2 sweaters, but the cold was seeping into his bones. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the isolation. The weight of the secret. Kaylin walked into the living room, carrying a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. He set them down and sat opposite Julian, the firelight casting dancing shadows across his sharp features. Drink, Kaylin said, pouring a glass. It'll warm you up. Julian took the glass, his fingers brushing Kaylin's. Kaylin didn't pull away this time. He held the contact, his eyes locking onto Julian's. How long are we going to do this? Kaylin asked quietly. Julian looked down at the wine, the red liquid swirling like blood. Do what? Pretend. Act. Kaylin's voice lost its bravado. It's exhausting, Jules. Watching you build these walls. Watching you flinch every time I get close. You said you didn't remember, Julian whispered. I lied. The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Julian's head snapped up. Kaylin looked tortured. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style. I remember everything. I remember the smell of your skin. I remember the sound you made. I remember that you kissed me back. Kaylin, why do you think I drank so much that night? Kaylin laughed, a bitter, self-deprecating sound. I was terrified. I saw you watching that video of those 2 men and you looked so open. And I realized you never look at me like that. You look at me like I'm a bro, a roommate. And it was killing me. Julian stared at him, his world tilting on its axis. You were jealous of a video clip. I was jealous that you wanted that intimacy, but you didn't want it with me. Kalen confessed, his voice cracking. So I drank. And I forced it. And then I woke up and realized I might have ruined the single most important relationship in my life. So I lied. I thought, if I pretended it never happened, you wouldn't hate me. I don't hate you, Julian said, his voice trembling, tears pricking his eyes. The dam was breaking. The straight act was dissolving into the ether. I don't hate you, Kalen. God, I'm so tired. Tired of what? Of acting, Julian choked out. I wasn't watching that video for research. I was watching it because I was lonely. Because I'm in love with my straight roommate and I thought I had to starve myself of everything just to stay in his orbit. Silence. The wood in the fireplace popped, sending a shower of sparks upward. Kalen stared at him, shock washing over his features, followed quickly by a dawn of realization so bright it was blinding. You thought I was straight? You date models. Julian shouted, the frustration boiling over. You talk about tits. You act like a frat boy half the time. I was mirroring you, Kalen shouted back, moving to his knees, closing the distance between them. You were so rigid, so obsessed with being a guy's guy. I thought if I came on to you, you'd freak out. I dated those women to make you jealous, you idiot. It never worked. You just congratulated me. They stared at each other, panting, the absurdity of 3 years of mutual deception hanging between them. Two architects of their own misery. We are, Julian breathed, the stupidest people on earth. Agreed, Kalen whispered. He reached out. This time, there was no hesitation. No alcohol-fueled aggression. He wrapped his arms around Julian's waist and pulled him in. It wasn't a sexual pounce. It was the holiday hug. But it was heavy, crushing, and desperate. Julian buried his face in the crook of Kalen's neck, inhaling the scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest. Kalen squeezed him so tight it was hard to breathe, rocking him gently. I'm not letting go, Kalen murmured into Julian's hair. Act is over. No more walls. No more lies. No more lies, Julian agreed, his hands clutching the back of Kalen's sweater. Kalen pulled back just enough to look at Julian. The firelight reflected in his dark eyes, making them look like molten gold. So, he whispered, his gaze dropping to Julian's lips, since we're being honest, can I do what I've wanted to do since the day you moved in? If it involves kissing me, Julian smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that felt like sunshine after a 3-year winter. Then yes. And as the storm raged outside, sealing them away from the world, the viper finally tamed the wolf, not with a bite, but with a surrender. If you enjoyed seeing Julian finally drop the mask and let Kalen take control, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Kalen for the lie? Or is pretending to have amnesia a red flag you can't ignore? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,